When a woman returns after a period of no contact, it is not simply because time has passed or because she suddenly remembered the good moments shared. It is not nostalgia alone that brings her back, nor is it just loneliness or curiosity. Something deeper is at play, something fundamental to human psychology. It is the undeniable fact that the absence of a man, when paired with genuine self-improvement and transformation, creates a shift in perception. It is not the silence itself that draws her back. It is what happens within that silence. The man she left is no longer the same man, and that change is what compels her to reevaluate everything. Many men believe that no contact is a trick, a mere tactic to make her miss them. They think that by simply pulling away, they can force her to chase, but this approach is flawed because it assumes that absence alone is enough. The reality is that absence without change is meaningless. If a man removes himself from a woman's life but remains the same weak, insecure, approval-seeking version of himself, there is no reason for her to return. Why would she? She left for a reason, and if nothing has changed, the same reason that pushed her away in the first place will still exist when she looks back. The key is transformation. Women are not drawn back to the past, they are drawn to something new, something intriguing, something that now possesses value in a way it did not before. A man who truly uses the period of no contact to evolve into a better, stronger, more disciplined version of himself becomes a different presence entirely. His energy changes, his demeanor shifts, his aura is no longer one of neediness but of quiet confidence. And this shift is something women notice instinctively. They feel it before they even see it. Attraction is built on a sense of value, on the perception that someone possesses qualities that are worth investing in. When a man spends his time in self-pity, obsessing over what he lost, waiting for a text, hoping for her return, he remains stuck in a state of emotional dependence. This is not attractive. It does not create the kind of pull that makes a woman reconsider. But when a man genuinely embraces solitude as an opportunity for growth, when he focuses on his goals, disciplines his mind, strengthens his body, and cultivates an internal sense of purpose, he naturally begins to elevate himself. He stops reacting emotionally, stops seeking external validation, stops needing her presence to feel complete. And when that shift occurs, everything changes. Women have a deep subconscious ability to sense male energy. They can distinguish between a man who is waiting and a man who is thriving. A man who remains stagnant, who lingers in his pain, who hopes and prays for her return, gives off an energy of desperation, even if he never says a word. On the other hand, a man who has truly changed no longer carries the same emotional weight. He is lighter, freer, moving forward with purpose rather than clinging to the past. He no longer projects loss, he projects possibility. This change creates curiosity. When a woman leaves a man, she assumes, whether consciously or subconsciously, that she understands him fully, that she has him figured out. She believes she knows his strengths and weaknesses, that she has already seen everything he has to offer. But when she senses a shift, when she starts to see that he is no longer acting the way she expected, that he is no longer emotionally tied to her absence, that he is building a life that no longer centers around her, she begins to wonder if she was wrong. And that doubt, that crack in certainty, is what makes her rethink everything. It is not about making her jealous, not about proving a point, not about manipulation. It is about becoming a man who is valuable in his own right, a man who is not defined by a past relationship but by his own self-worth. When a woman returns, it is often because she senses that the man she left behind no longer exists in the same way. He is stronger, more focused, more disciplined. He is no longer the man who would bend over backward for her attention, no longer the man who would tolerate disrespect, no longer the man who places her at the center of his world. And that realization is what makes her second guess her decision. But the truth is, a man who has truly changed does not wait for her return. He is not doing the work for her, he is doing it for himself. He is not trying to impress her, he is building himself into a version that he respects. And paradoxically, that very detachment, that refusal to need her validation, is what makes him even more attractive. A man who is moving forward creates a pull that is undeniable because he is no longer chasing, no longer waiting, no longer hoping. He is simply becoming, and that is what draws her back. A man who waits and hopes for her return remains stagnant and unattractive. This is a fundamental truth that many fail to understand. They believe that time alone will change things, that if they simply disappear long enough, she will somehow realize what she lost and come running back. But this is not how human psychology works, and it is certainly not how attraction functions. Women are not drawn to a man who is waiting in the shadows, frozen in time, hoping that she will one day return. They are drawn to movement, to progress, to the unmistakable energy of someone who is growing beyond what they once were. When a man puts his life on pause, focusing all his energy on the possibility of reconciliation, he unconsciously signals weakness. He sends a message, whether he realizes it or not, that his sense of self-worth is tied to her decision, that his emotional state depends on whether or not she chooses to come back, and this is deeply unattractive. No one, man or woman, wants to be with someone who lacks a strong internal foundation, someone who needs them in order to feel whole. People are drawn to strength, to confidence, to those who carry themselves with purpose and direction. A man who is simply waiting, hoping, and longing for the past is none of these things. The reality is that when a woman walks away, she has already made a calculation in her mind. Consciously or subconsciously, she has decided that there is something about the relationship that no longer aligns with what she wants. This could be a loss of respect, a feeling of emotional stagnation, or a realization that the dynamic between you no longer excites her. If she senses that you are too emotionally dependent, too predictable, too passive in the relationship, then leaving you was not just about wanting space, it was about testing whether you could become the kind of man who no longer needs her in order to thrive. The worst thing a man can do in this situation is confirm her decision by proving that without her, he is lost. If he waits, if he checks his phone obsessively, if he builds his days around the hope that she will come back, then he has given up his power. He has placed his value in her hands rather than in himself. And no woman, regardless of how much she once cared, will be drawn back to a man who has lost himself in this way. On the other hand, when a man refuses to wait, when he decides that his time, energy, and potential are too valuable to waste on hoping for someone else's decision, he changes, not just on the surface, but at a fundamental level. He stops acting like someone who is waiting to be chosen and instead starts acting like someone who chooses himself. He shifts from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance, from one of weakness to one of quiet strength. Women are instinctively drawn to men who are in motion, men who are evolving, men who are actively engaged in the process of becoming something greater. When a woman leaves and later sees that the man she left behind has transformed, not just superficially, but in the way he carries himself, in the way he speaks, in the way he interacts with the world, she begins to wonder if she made a mistake. She begins to see him through a different lens because he is no longer the same man she walked away from. But the key is that this transformation must be real. Many men make the mistake of pretending to move on, of trying to look like they have changed, just to get her attention. But if the core of who they are remains the same, if they are still waiting, still hoping, still basing their actions on the idea of her return, then she will sense it. Women have an intuitive ability to see through facades, to recognize when a man is still emotionally attached, even if he tries to act otherwise. If the change is not authentic, if it is merely a performance, it will fail. The only way forward is true self-improvement. A man must take the energy he once directed toward the relationship and channel it into something productive, something meaningful. He must pursue his goals with discipline, strengthen his body, sharpen his mind, expand his horizons. He must develop a sense of purpose that is independent of her presence. A reason to wake up in the morning that has nothing to do with whether or not she ever comes back. The paradox is that the more a man embraces this path, the less he will care whether she returns at all. And it is precisely this detachment, this newfound sense of self-sufficiency, that creates the strongest form of attraction. Because now he is not the same man she left, he is someone better, someone more complete, someone whose worth is no longer tied to her validation. And when she sees this, when she recognizes that he is no longer waiting, that he has stepped into a version of himself that is undeniably valuable, she may feel a pull she did not expect. When a man allows himself to be broken by a breakup, when he sinks into despair, spends his time longing for her and does nothing to better himself, he confirms her decision. He proves that she was right to leave. If she sees that he is stagnant, that he has allowed the loss to define him, she feels justified in her choice. This is why waiting and hoping for her return is a losing game. Nothing about a man who is stuck in his past, repeating old mistakes, or dwelling in self-pity makes a woman reconsider. In fact, it often reinforces her belief that she made the right decision. But when a man takes the pain of separation and channels it into growth, everything changes. A breakup is a test, an opportunity, a challenge to become something more than he was before. If he takes it as an invitation to develop discipline, to refine his body and mind, to push forward with a level of determination he never had before, he starts to rebuild himself. And this shift, this transformation is not just about appearances or material success. It is about an internal restructuring of his entire identity. He stops seeking validation. He stops looking back. He stops measuring his worth by whether or not she approves of him. Women are naturally drawn to strength, to resilience, to men who possess a quiet confidence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. When a man truly improves himself, not for her, not to prove a point, but because he recognizes his own potential, he changes his entire energy. He no longer moves through life as someone who was left behind, as someone waiting for things to go back to how they used to be. Instead, he steps into his own power, operating from a place of independence and purpose. When this happens, the power dynamic shifts. The woman who left begins to notice, whether consciously or subconsciously, that he is no longer emotionally tied to her. He is no longer waiting, and this shift is unsettling because it disrupts the assumptions she made when she walked away. She expected him to stay the same. She assumes she had him figured out. But when she sees a version of him that is different, more disciplined, more focused, more detached, she starts to wonder if she made a mistake. Women respect men who respect themselves. A man who allows himself to fall apart after being left behind is not demonstrating self-respect, he is demonstrating emotional dependency. And that dependency is precisely what kills attraction. But when a man reclaims his power, when he builds himself into someone he respects, everything changes. His posture changes, his tone changes. The way he carries himself commands attention. He no longer acts like someone waiting for permission to be chosen, he acts like someone who chooses himself. Attraction is rooted in the perception of value. A man who improves himself, who expands his capabilities, who becomes stronger and more self-sufficient, becomes a man of higher value. And when a woman sees this, she cannot help but reconsider. She begins to question whether she truly understood him. She starts to wonder if the man she left behind is no longer the man standing in front of her. And that uncertainty, that disruption of her original perception, is what makes her second guess her choice. But here's the key. True self-improvement is not about making her regret leaving. It is not about playing a game or trying to manipulate her emotions. It is about becoming a man who no longer cares whether she regrets it or not. Because the real transformation is not in how she sees him, it is in how he sees himself. A man who has truly improved does not need her to validate his growth. He does not need her to come back to feel whole. He has already won because he has become the kind of man who will never allow himself to be in the same position again. If she returns, it is not because he waited for her. It is because she sees something in him now that was missing before. But by the time she realizes this, he has already outgrown the version of himself that once needed her approval. He is no longer controlled by her choices because he has reclaimed the power that was once in her hands. And in that moment, the true victory is not in her reconsideration, it is in the fact that he no longer needs it. When a woman sees that you have moved on, that you are no longer waiting for her, it challenges everything she assumed about you. Human nature operates on a predictable psychological framework. People tend to believe that their choices are final, that once they walk away, the other person will remain emotionally tied to them, at least for a while. Women in particular often assume that the man they left behind will continue to dwell in their absence, at least for some time. But when a man does the opposite, when he stops waiting, stops chasing, stops acting like a man who has lost something, he disrupts that expectation in a way that forces her to see him in a different light. Attraction is tied to value, and value is perceived through behavior. A man who clings to the past, who waits endlessly, who subtly signals that his world has stopped without her, he is not demonstrating value. He is demonstrating weakness, and weakness repels rather than attracts. A man of value does not beg, he does not wait, he does not dwell on what was lost. He builds, he moves forward, he creates. When a woman sees that the man she left is no longer emotionally entangled in the loss, she is confronted with a reality she did not anticipate. People always assume they understand you, that they know how you will react, that they have you figured out. A woman who leaves a man does so with the assumption that she knows how he will handle it. She expects sadness, longing, waiting. If he fits into that pattern, she feels no urgency to reconsider her decision. But when he does not fit the mold, when he moves on with such strength and clarity that it almost seems as if he has forgotten her, something strange happens. Her confidence in her decision wavers. She begins to wonder whether she made a mistake, not because he is trying to make her feel that way, but because she sees that he has become someone she can no longer control. Control in relationships is not always intentional, but it exists. When a woman walks away, there is often a subconscious belief that she still holds a certain amount of power over the man's emotions. If he reacts predictably, waiting and hoping for her return, she knows that her decision still affects him, that she is still in control of the situation. But when he breaks free of that control, when he demonstrates through his actions that he is no longer emotionally attached to her decision, he forces her to reevaluate her perception of him. This shift in perception is what triggers the reconsideration. When a man no longer needs a woman to return, when he has built himself into someone greater than he was before, she no longer sees him as the man she left. She sees a new version of him, one that is no longer defined by the past. This version of him is not seeking her approval, not waiting for her attention, not craving her validation. He has become independent in a way that challenges her belief that she had him figured out. The most attractive thing a man can do after a breakup is to genuinely move forward, not as a strategy to make her return, but as a natural response to loss. Strength is magnetic, and true strength is demonstrated in the ability to let go, to rebuild, to become someone even better than before. Women are not drawn to men who are stuck in the past. They are drawn to men who evolved beyond it. The paradox is that when a man fully embraces this truth, when he reaches the point where he no longer cares whether she comes back or not, that is when she begins to reconsider. But at this stage, something significant has changed. He is no longer the same man who once feared losing her. He is no longer emotionally dependent on her presence. He no longer needs her return to validate his worth. If she does come back, she will not be returning to the man she left, but to someone new, someone stronger, more self-assured, more independent. And because he has built himself up in a way that does not rely on her, he will have the power to decide whether or not he even wants her back. This is the moment where the true transformation is revealed. When a man has grown beyond the point of needing her return, he sees things with a clarity that was not possible before. He no longer looks at her through the lens of desperation, but through the lens of choice. He evaluates whether she truly aligns with the man he has become. The power dynamic has shifted entirely, and he is no longer at the mercy of her decision. He is now the one making the decision. This is why the men who move on authentically, who build themselves into something greater, who refuse to be defined by the past, end up in the strongest position. Women are drawn to men who lead, who create, who become. When a man stops waiting and starts living, he stops being an option and starts being the kind of man who naturally attracts not just his past, but new opportunities, new relationships, and a new level of self-respect that he would never trade for the past. The real power does not lie in making her return. It lies in reaching the point where it no longer matters if she does. When a man transforms himself, when he moves forward without looking back, he reclaims the control that was once lost in the breakup. A woman returns not because she was pursued, not because she was begged to reconsider, but because she sees a man who no longer seeks her validation. And by the time she realizes what she has lost, he has already found something greater. His own strength, his own purpose, and a life that no longer revolves around the past. True victory is not in her return, but in the fact that he no longer needs it.